Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something most people never pause to consider. What if the breakthrough you're waiting for doesn't come from saying more, but from saying less? What if the next level of your life isn't about pushing louder, but standing quieter? We've been taught that progress has to be noisy, visible, and fast. But in reality, true growth, lasting, undeniable, purpose-driven growth often happens in silence. Because silence is not weakness. It's not retreat. It's not lack of movement. Silence is where strategy is born. Stillness is where clarity finds you. And when you stop trying to prove your worth, your value, your calling, you start to embody it. This isn't a message about doing less. It's about becoming more. And it starts by understanding this truth. When you're rooted in purpose, everything you're reaching for begins to reach for you. People often misunderstand silence. They see someone who isn't loud, someone who doesn't jump into every conversation or debate, and they label that person as passive, weak, or disengaged. But silence is not weakness. Silence is not surrender. In fact, silence, when chosen with purpose, is one of the most powerful strategies in life. Think about it, the most valuable moves are often made in silence. The roots of a tree grow deep beneath the surface long before any fruit appears. The strongest foundations are built in stillness, without fanfare or noise. In the same way, real transformation in life doesn't start when you're talking. It starts when you're listening, observing, reflecting, and aligning. Noise may attract attention, but silence attracts wisdom. When you're silent, you're not just avoiding conflict or stepping back. You're engaging at a deeper level. You're conserving energy, processing data, discerning motives, and sharpening your edge. There's power in being the one who doesn't react, who doesn't rush, who doesn't reveal every move. The person who can stay silent in a loud world is a person who cannot be easily manipulated. When you're quiet, you gain control over your emotions, your surroundings, and even over the people who expect you to respond. Most people live for validation. They speak to be seen. They post to be praised. They argue to prove something. But when you're truly confident in your purpose, you realize you don't need to perform. You don't need to constantly explain, defend, or promote yourself. Purpose doesn't require a microphone. It just requires movement, and movement doesn't have to be loud. Silence gives you the space to think strategically instead of reacting emotionally. Have you ever noticed how the wisest people speak the least? That's not because they have nothing to say. It's because they understand that every word is a seed. Every word is a choice. And just like a seed, once it's planted, it will grow into something. So you better be intentional about what you speak. The person who talks too much often leaks their power, but the person who remains silent holds the room, commands respect, and controls the narrative without ever raising their voice. Silence is how you study the room. Silence is how you discern the motives of others. Silence is how you protect your peace while others expose their chaos. There are people who will try to provoke you just to pull you out of position. They want your reaction because your reaction gives them control. But when you stay silent, you keep your power. You stay in alignment with your purpose rather than being pulled into petty distractions. We live in an age where people think loud is strong, but noise without direction is just chaos. A lion doesn't roar at every passing animal. It waits, it watches, and it strikes with precision. Silence allows you to move in purpose, not in panic. It forces you to be intentional rather than impulsive. It gives you the edge in a world where everyone else is busy making noise and missing their moment. When you're silent, you're not checked out. You're tuned in. You're studying patterns. You're identifying opportunities. You're building in secret what others will be shocked to see revealed. That business idea, that personal transformation, that spiritual growth, all of it is happening while you're quiet. Because growth that's real doesn't need to announce itself. It simply shows up. The moment you stop needing to prove yourself is the moment you step into real power. Silence becomes your strategy, not because you're scared, but because you're secure. You don't rush to speak because your purpose isn't on the clock. You don't defend your worth because your value doesn't come from applause. You don't panic when people misunderstand you because your identity isn't built on opinions. You know who you are, and that kind of knowing gives you the ability to be still. The people who win in life, in business, in relationships, in calling, they aren't the loudest. They're the most focused. They're the most disciplined. They know when to speak, and they know when to hold their peace. They don't waste their energy fighting small battles because they're locked in on a bigger mission. They use silence the way a skilled warrior uses a sword, with precision, power, and purpose. When life goes quiet, when doors seem stuck, opportunities feel delayed, and your prayers feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling, it's easy to think that nothing is happening. It's easy to believe you're being overlooked, forgotten, or left behind. But that quiet season you're in, that's not punishment. That's preparation. That's heaven's workshop. God does his best work in silence. When he formed the earth, there was no audience. When he shaped the stars, there was no applause. And when he begins shaping your next level, it often happens behind closed doors where no one's clapping, no one's watching, and no one's validating. Why? Because what he's building in you requires focus, not fanfare. The quiet season is where your character is developed. It's where your patience is tested and your faith is stretched. It's where God wins you off the need for attention so he can anchor you in identity. See, if he gave you everything you asked for instantly, your character might not be able to carry it. That dream you're waiting on, that business, that breakthrough, that calling, it's too heavy to hand over to someone still addicted to noise. So he isolates you not to punish you, but to prepare you. You may be asking, why is nothing working right now? But in heaven's workshop, silence doesn't mean stillness. It means construction. It means the blueprint is being drafted, the foundation is being poured, and the framework is being set up so that what you receive won't collapse under pressure. You might not see results, but that doesn't mean you're not making progress. Heaven builds differently. Heaven builds deeply. This is why comparison will kill your momentum in the quiet. When you start looking at what others are doing in their highlight season while you're in your hidden season, you'll start to despise your own process. But don't confuse public visibility with divine favor. What looks loud might be shallow, and what feels hidden might be deeply rooted. God is more interested in your roots than your reach, because reach without roots is a recipe for collapse. The quiet season teaches you how to hear differently. When the noise fades, you learn to distinguish between the voice of your flesh and the whisper of God. You learn the rhythm of peace. You develop discernment. You stop chasing likes and start seeking alignment. That's the work God does when it's silent. He cleans your motives, clarifies your vision, and calls you higher. And let's be honest, if everything happened the moment we asked for it, we'd trust the blessing, not the builder. But in the workshop of heaven, delay doesn't mean denial. It means design. God is not just answering your prayer. He's designing the version of you that can handle the answer. So while you're waiting, he's working. While you're resting, he's rearranging. While you're wondering if he heard you, he's preparing to exceed what you even had the courage to ask for. You're not buried, you're being planted. And in due time, what was done in silence will speak louder than anything you could have built on your own. Don't curse the quiet. That's where God crafts the most powerful transformations. Stay faithful in the dark, because the light is coming. And when it comes, it won't just expose your growth, it will reveal his glory through you. Stillness is one of the most misunderstood principles in life. People think if you're not constantly moving, constantly posting, constantly pushing, you're falling behind. But the truth is, stillness is not stagnation, it's strategy. Stillness doesn't mean nothing is happening, it means something powerful is being aligned. Just because you're not moving visibly doesn't mean you're not being positioned divinely. In nature, the arrow must be pulled back before it can be launched forward. The greater the tension in the backward pull, the farther the arrow flies. In the same way, when life feels like you're being held in place, it might not be rejection, it might be preparation for supernatural speed. You're not stuck, you're being aimed. And when the time is right, you won't just step into the next season. You'll soar into it. We live in a world that glorifies hustle and speed. Everyone's racing. Everyone's grinding. Everyone's trying to get ahead. But supernatural speed doesn't come from striving. It comes from surrender. It comes from alignment. It comes when your soul is still enough to hear God's direction clearly and your heart is strong enough to obey it without hesitation. The ones who wait well, who wait with faith, with discipline, with focus, are the ones who end up moving faster than everyone who rushed ahead in fear. Stillness gives you clarity. When you slow down, you can actually see the path instead of running blindly. The world says, don't just stand there, do something. But the Spirit often says, don't just do something, stand still. Because in the stillness, your ears open. In the stillness, your vision sharpens. In the stillness, your spirit aligns with heaven's timing. And timing is everything. There are people who get ahead of schedule and self-destruct. They arrive at the door of destiny before they're ready to handle what's on the other side. But those who honor the pace of grace will never miss what's meant for them. God doesn't just want you to arrive, He wants you to arrive ready. And that readiness is built in the still, quiet moments most people rush through or try to avoid. Waiting well isn't just about patience, it's about posture. How are you waiting? Are you anxious, bitter, doubting, frustrated, or are you expectant, obedient, disciplined, and at peace? Because the way you wait will determine the way you move when the door opens. Some people rush into the blessing and lose it just as fast because they didn't develop the character during the quiet. Others move into opportunity with grace and precision because the stillness taught them how to hear, how to move, and how to trust. And here's the truth: when God is ready to move you, He doesn't need a long runway. He doesn't need years of setup. He doesn't operate in natural speed. He works in supernatural acceleration. What should have taken 10 years can happen in 10 days when you're aligned. But you won't catch that wave of divine momentum if you're too busy forcing things in your own strength. Stillness is how you stay in rhythm with the one who controls the wind. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing the right things at the right time with the right spirit. And sometimes the right thing is to wait, not out of fear, not out of laziness, but out of wisdom, out of trust, out of spiritual maturity that says, I don't need to rush what God is preparing, because when He moves suddenly. And those who've been still ready, faithful, they won't have to catch up. They'll already be in position. Words are expensive, and the wise know how to spend them. Every sentence you speak pulls from your emotional bank account. Every opinion you share takes something from your mental energy. Every unnecessary explanation, every debate, every impulsive reaction, those aren't just harmless expressions. They are withdrawals from your focus, your clarity, your strength. And when you speak too freely, too often, and too carelessly, you're not just talking, you're leaking power. We've been conditioned to believe that saying more makes us sound smarter, more confident, more persuasive. But in reality, the opposite is true. The more you talk without purpose, the more you dilute your authority. Kings don't explain everything. Warriors don't reveal their battle plans. Masters of their craft are deliberate with their language. They understand that their voice carries weight, so they don't waste it trying to be loud. They use it to be effective. You don't have to respond to every message. You don't have to correct every critic. You don't have to defend every decision you make. If you constantly feel the need to justify, prove, or over-explain, it means your peace is tied to people's approval, and that's a dangerous place to live. Because the moment you hand someone your words out of insecurity, you also hand them your control. You become reactive instead of responsive, noisy instead of intentional. Silence isn't just protection, it's power preservation. It creates space for you to listen, to observe, to discern. And when you do speak, your words carry substance because they come from a place of overflow, not obligation. When your words are chosen with care, people lean in. They respect the silence between your statements because they know that when you do speak, it matters. You can't build anything lasting if you keep spending your words on temporary emotions. Every time you speak from frustration, you're investing in confusion. Every time you speak from fear, you're investing in doubt. But when you learn to pause, to breathe, to wait before you speak, you begin to deposit clarity, strength, and direction into your environment. You become someone whose voice sets a tone, not someone who adds to the noise. This is especially true when you're building something, whether it's a business, a vision, a relationship, or a legacy. Builders don't talk more than they work. They don't narrate every brick they lay. They let the results speak for themselves. You don't need to keep announcing what you're about to do. Do it, and let the fruit be the evidence. Talk less about your intentions and let execution be your language. Even spiritually, this principle holds true. The most powerful prayers aren't the longest, they're the most aligned. The most impactful moments with God often happen in silence, not in speeches. When your spirit is in sync with divine timing, you don't need to shout. You just need to speak in agreement. That kind of clarity only comes when you've learned to filter your words, to speak with purpose, and to resist the temptation to overshare. Because here's the truth: every time you open your mouth, you're either planting seeds of strength or scattering distractions. You're either building something meaningful or bleeding energy. And the more intentional you become with your language, the more power you reclaim. You begin to speak life, not noise, direction, not confusion, purpose, not performance. So treat your words like precious currency. Don't spend them on people who haven't earned your trust. Don't waste them on arguments that lead nowhere. Don't leak your destiny in the form of premature announcements. Save your words for what matters. Your vision, your assignment, your legacy. Because when your words carry weight, you won't need many. In a world addicted to volume, everyone's trying to be the loudest. Louder opinions, louder marketing, louder personalities. But here's the truth: loud doesn't mean clear. Loud doesn't mean right. Loud doesn't even mean heard. The loudest voice might dominate the moment, but it's the clearest voice that shapes the future. It's clarity, not noise, that cuts through chaos, captures attention, and leaves a lasting impact. You don't have to yell to be effective. You don't have to shout to be seen. When your words carry conviction, when your message is rooted in truth and refined by discipline, it doesn't matter how loud you say it. What matters is how deeply it lands. A whisper filled with wisdom has more weight than a scream filled with confusion. A few clear words spoken at the right time can open more doors than 1,000 shouted at the wrong time. Think about the voices you still remember, the speeches, the mentors, the advice that stuck with you. It wasn't just their energy that moved you. It was their clarity. They knew exactly what they were saying and why. They didn't drown their message in fluff or filler. They didn't speak to impress. They spoke to impact. Their words were arrows, not noise. Focused, intentional, powerful. Clarity comes from alignment. When you know who you are, when you're clear on your assignment, when you're rooted in your values, you don't need to shout. You don't need to explain yourself endlessly. You don't need to compete with chaos. You can speak with authority, not because you forced it, but because you carry it. An authority that's real doesn't have to announce itself. It just resonates. On the other hand, noise is often a cover for confusion. People who haven't done the inner work to get clear on their purpose will try to compensate with volume. They'll try to impress instead of impact. But there's a big difference between making noise and making moves. One demands attention. The other creates transformation. This principle applies in business, leadership, ministry, relationships, every area of life. The entrepreneur who communicates clearly solves problems. The leader who speaks with clarity builds trust. The partner who communicates with calm creates connection. The voice that's clear, focused, and rooted in truth will always outlast the one that's just loud. Even spiritually, this pattern holds. God's voice wasn't in the earthquake. It wasn't in the fire. It was in the still, small voice. Power doesn't always come with noise. Often, it comes in clarity. And if you want to be someone whose words carry power, you've got to quiet the noise in your own life first. You've got to remove the mental clutter, the emotional distractions, and the need for validation that forces you to speak more than necessary. You've got to train your voice in the silence so that when you do speak, your words carry weight. Every time you open your mouth, you're casting a vision. Whether you know it or not, you're painting a picture with your words of who you are, where you're going, what you believe. And if your picture is blurry, people won't follow. They won't trust. They won't move. But when your message is crystal clear, it creates alignment. It creates energy. It activates movement. So the goal is not just to be heard. The goal is to be understood. The goal is not just to get attention. It's to get results. Speak less but mean more. Cut the fluff. Say what matters. Let your words be precise, not performative. Because clarity builds confidence, not just in you, but in the people around you. And confidence is contagious. Let everyone else fight to be loud. You fight to be clear. Because in the end, the loudest voice may echo for a moment, but the clearest one builds a legacy. When you're truly rooted in purpose, there's no need to perform, persuade, or prove anything to anyone. Just like a tree doesn't beg for validation while its roots stretch deep into the earth, you don't need to broadcast every move to justify your growth. Real purpose is quiet power. It doesn't demand applause, it produces results. Purpose is internal before it ever becomes external. It's established in the unseen long before it becomes visible. That's why the most powerful people often appear the calmest. They're not in a rush to convince you of their calling. They're not exhausting themselves trying to prove their worth. They're grounded. And when you're grounded, you don't chase attention. You attract it. You don't force fruit. You bear it in season. We live in a time where people feel pressure to constantly show their progress, explain their journey, or make their purpose palatable for others. But here's the truth. When you're really locked into what you were created for, you stop arguing with people who don't see it. You stop over-explaining to people who aren't assigned to your destiny. You stop trying to look like you're growing and just grow. Trees never announce their process. They don't post their progress. They just dig deeper and reach higher, season after season. Their strength isn't in their noise, it's in their roots. And those roots are developed in darkness, underground, in places no one sees. That's what gives them the strength to withstand storms and still keep rising. Your purpose works the same way. The deeper your roots go, the less you're shaken by what's happening around you. And when you understand that, silence stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like protection. You realize you're not hidden, you're being held. You're not overlooked, you're being developed. And when the fruit comes, when the evidence starts to show, you won't need to explain how you got there. The results will speak. The doors will open. The impact will echo louder than any announcement ever could. The dangerous thing about trying to prove your purpose is that it puts you in a posture of performance. And performance always pulls you away from authenticity. You start shaping your path based on what looks impressive instead of what's truly aligned. You start saying yes to things that aren't your assignment just to stay visible. But visibility without alignment is a trap. It looks like progress, but it drains your soul. Rooted people, though, they move differently. They're consistent even when they're not celebrated. They're faithful even when they're not followed. They keep showing up, keep building, keep sowing. Not because people are watching, but because purpose is working. They're not attached to applause. They're anchored in assignment. And that anchor keeps them steady in every season. Being rooted also gives you patience. You're not thrown off by someone else's pace, because you know what's for you can't be rushed and it can't be missed. You're not triggered by trends or intimidated by timelines. You understand that just because someone else is blooming doesn't mean you're behind. Your season is coming. And when it does, it'll be obvious that the quiet wasn't a delay, it was divine design. So stop worrying about who sees you. Stop exhausting yourself trying to explain where you're going or why you're not there yet. Purpose doesn't panic. Purpose doesn't prove. Purpose just produces. And as long as you're planted in what's real, what's right, and what's true to your calling, the fruit will come. The doors will open. The right people will recognize. And you won't need to say a word. So stay silent, stay planted, and trust the process. You don't need to announce your growth when your life is becoming the evidence. You don't need to prove your purpose when your fruit is proving it for you. Let the noise chase attention. You chase alignment. Because in the end, it's not the loudest that lasts, it's the rooted. And when you're rooted in truth, anchored in purpose, and surrendered to timing, everything meant for you will arrive, naturally, powerfully, and undeniably. Let your silence become your strength. Let your stillness become your strategy. And let your fruit do the talking.